right, let's go to Dallas, where the Cowboys have a running back situation. As in, who's going to play running back on the team? Okay, Tony Pollard is gone. They haven't added another back. So what might they do? Well, Adam Schefter with us now with some of those answers. Adam, what is going on in the running back front for Dallas right now?
Laura, over the weekend, Jeremy Fowler reported that there was a chance there was a mutual interest in Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys reuniting. Now, think about it this way. Ezekiel Elliott needs a team, and there's not a team that makes any more sense than the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys still need another running back, and there's not another running back that makes any more sense than Ezekiel Elliott. So clearly, there would seem to be, as Jeremy pointed out, some mutual interest in the two sides. Now, last week at the owners' meetings, Mike McCarthy talked about the fact the team was really happy to have Rico Dowdle back at the running back position, but it might not be done in free agency just yet. So clearly, this is a team that knows it still needs to add more help at the running back position. Zeke is a name that's clearly out there. It does make some sense. The running back market now is calmed down and teams are looking for values. And we'll see if these two sides can figure out a way to reunite for the upcoming season.
I'm reading the tea leaves and I see Zeke there. Okay, last season in Dallas for Zeke. In 2022 was that last season. It was far from his most productive, but he did contribute to a Dallas run game that ranked top 10 in yards per rush, touchdowns, and 10-yard rushes. The production fell off in 2023 without him, okay? They ranked in the bottom half of the league in all three categories. There's certainly some different reasons for that, but either way, you can see how important he was in some ways. Mina, is running back, though, the biggest need for this team as they head towards the draft?
No, it's a need, and one I think they can address later in the draft. By the way, Estime, who Dan pointed out, the back from Notre Dame, I actually would really like here in Dallas later in the later rounds, kind of that inside zone running, can pass protect, can catch passes. But the bigger need is clearly offensive line, especially after losing both Tyron Smith and Tyler Biadasz, their center. If they kick out Tyler Smith to left tackle, then you're looking at the interior at pick 24. I think there'll be some interesting options for them. But there might be a tackle available, in which case they can let Tyler Smith stay inside. Regardless, they have to go offensive line, which is a position that this team has recently been very good at drafting and developing, and I would be, frankly, very surprised if they don't go to that position again in this draft.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interior offensive line. I really do. You know, Tyler Smith was drafted, in essence, to replace Tyron Smith. It seems like that time is now, and I know you're taking a guy that was really good at guard and moving him from there. The center from Oregon, Powers Johnson, like I think of an offense, when you lose your center, it is such a big deal. You can get good guards, not minimizing that, but like if you don't have a center, you don't have an offensive line. And I just think Dallas needs to be very clear with finding the cog of that offense right in the heart of it and replacing Tyler Biadasz, who left.
All right, so Graham Barton, center from Duke. Your floor is now pick 24. But let's focus on the running backs just a little bit once more. We'll go to the second, maybe even the third round options for Dallas, because they need somebody who can finish drives for them. That was a problem with Tony Pollard last season. A couple of names that do come to mind here. We just talked about Jonathan Brooks a few moments ago. This is a classic Jerry Jones pick. If you look at him over the past decade or so, he has taken big swings in the second round. A guy coming off of an ACL tear in November would be a swing in the second round. He would not have been available this late if not for the injury. And then Braylon Allen, who somehow is still 20 years old. He came to Wisconsin, 17-year-old, looked, he's like a Greek god out there. His power was not on display as much this past season as Wisconsin shifted offenses. A team that we know, your father's Wisconsin Badgers, were not on display last year. This is like the rest of college football. A lot of zone schemes. Guys are spread all out. It did not maximize Braylon Allen. I do think, though, behind that offensive line that even with some depth issues, still has some very good key cogs. Braylon Allen could be the kind of guy that if he goes to Dallas in the third round, we'd be saying he's going to have a massive rookie of the year type offensive role in Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, they will be a different O-line, but to your point, they had one of the best run blocking NFL lines last year. They ranked 5th in run block win rate. So maybe a good success for Braylon Allen there.
He's a monster.
Coming up here on NFL Live, the Giants worked out quarterback J.J. McCarthy over the weekend, but is are Aiyuk and the 49ers at all close on a new deal?
They've discussed it, Laura. My understanding is maybe not right now, but they'd like to get it done. They'd like to see that deal get done at some point in time with them In the interim, there's been an awful lot of trade speculation about his future, but the 49ers have been very clear that their intention is not to trade Brandon Aiyuk, but to extend him. Now the question becomes trying to see if they could work out some type of arrangement that suits the wide receiver and the team, that remains cap friendly for a team that's up against the cap. They'd like to try to figure it out, but they say that they are not interested in trading him. Again, a lot of speculation about that possibility. The 49ers have gone out of their way to shoot that down and say they are not interested in trading Brandon Aiyuk.
You know, Brandon may already be using this stat, but this kind of proves the point of how important he is. NFL Next Gen Stats tracks a player's expected points added throughout the season, and basically how much a team's chances of scoring increases after a player gets targeted. As you see there, Brandon Aiyuk ranked 3rd in EPA among receivers in 2023, behind only CeeDee Lamb, who was in line for a major payday, and Tyreek Hill, who already signed one of the richest contracts a wideout has ever gotten. You see that rarefied air. Mina, how should the 49ers go about dealing with this?
This is a tricky one. Okay. Historically, it's always been really hard to pay 2 receivers at the top of the market. It's very rare. And I would argue there's even more of a case against it now for a couple of reasons. One is the production of young wide receivers coming into the NFL over the last 5 to 7 years. Of the top 30 receivers last year in yards per route run, 18 were still on their rookie contracts. I'd also argue a point against it is for years, there were very few receivers making more than 10% of the salary cap, maybe 1 or 2. Right now, there's 5. And if you expand that to 9.5% or more, it's 8. And that's before we get the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase deals. My point is the top receivers are making more than ever. So what does that mean for the San Francisco 49ers? Well, I would say they're in an interesting position because while I said all that stuff about you can't pay 2 receivers, they also have a quarterback who's making very little money right now. So I think they can thread the needle where they're paying the receivers and not the quarterback, but then you would have to move on from Debo, I would say a year out, and then you're going to start thinking about paying Brock. You can't pay all 3 at the same time, which is the predicament that Cincinnati finds themselves in. But I do think they can extend Aiyuk if they have a plan to move on from Debo, unfortunately, after this year.
Yeah, Cincinnati, Miami, Philly, potentially Minnesota, like they're all in this situation up and coming where the decision to pay both those receivers. I agree with Mina. I think you can pay 2 receivers. You can't pay 2 receivers and your wide receiver and your quarterback. I think the closest example that we've had to that was the Kansas City Chiefs. And now Travis wasn't getting paid as a high-end wide receiver. He was getting paid as the high-end tight end. And once they realized Patrick's going to cost a certain amount of money, Travis Kelce, they viewed as the most important person. Like, it sounds like Mina is saying if we just took the situation and made it laterally, that Brandon Aiyuk would be their Travis Kelce as far as level of importance, and they would choose to, not willingly, but choose to part ways with potentially Debo. I do think it's easier in San Francisco because of Christian McCaffrey. You know, McCaffrey, not that he can do everything Debo can do, but he can do a lot of the same things, Mina, that like the touches that Debo can get.
The timing, as Mina alluded to, may work out pretty well, too, when it comes down to threading that needle. We'll see if they end up deciding to do it. By the way, if you're wondering what Brock Purdy makes, he just received actually $739,795 in performance-based pay based on the NFL's formula for the CBA. So pretty good, considering his salary last season was $870,000.
Player performance is good.
Should be the draft plan for the Jets later this month, especially seeing all the additions that they've recently made.
I still remain adamant offensive line. I also believe that they could be a prime team to trade back just a little bit. They have 2 picks. Roster's really good. They have 2 picks in the top, like 111 in the draft. They have the 10th pick and the 72nd pick in the NFL draft. So while there is that influx of talent, they got to get depth. And Joe Douglas 2 years ago had the draft of the century, it felt like. He needs to hit it again. So I still say offensive line because out of their 5 starting offensive linemen, 2 have massive question marks attached to their health. And
they're older.
You know what I'm saying? Like AVT and Tyron Smith.
Yeah.
But John Simpson's only played 2 full seasons, in his career. Tippmann's still young. Morgan Moses, we'll see if he can. Like, I believe that the Jets have to remain adamant. The only way that this pays off is if Aaron Rodgers is protected. The only way that Aaron Rodgers is protected if they have 8 starting offensive linemen this season. So it's either take that offensive lineman or trade back a little bit and acquire another pick or 2.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you're right. They should take an offensive tackle. It is so obviously the smart thing to do in terms of straddling the future and being all in. And you mentioned the health questions. On the other hand, if Roma Dunze is there at 10, Dan, it's going to be so hard not to take him because Roma Dunze, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, are you kidding me? And we just talked earlier in the show about how hard it is to pay 2 receivers. Garrett Wilson, that contract's going to come sooner rather than later. So if you have another stud rookie on a cheap wide receiver on a rookie deal, that'll help them sort of take that Vikings-like approach. I know this is really like sensible versus bombs away, and if I wasn't so high on Odunze, I think it would be a lot easier. But I'm so high on him.
Mina, I think you're like real-time convincing Dan to go bombs away here.
No, I understand it. I understand it. I get it. I just know that the Bengals had the best triplets in football, and Joe Burrow ran for his life.
Yeah.
He did.
Okay.
Beyond that, I'll say this. I think the
They went to the
Jets
Super
might
Bowl.
have a Chicago Bears-sized Roma Dunze problem ahead of them, right? Because at number 9, if Roma Dunze is there for the Bears, I will be all over that for presumably Caleb Williams. I do think Brock Bowers is a name that should be mentioned at 10th overall, and I think he's going to be a name that people will continue to put him in mock drafts number 10 overall because this team needs to win now. Of course, the GM and the head coach understand this is a make-or-break season. So it's a lot easier for me to say this. But I'm Team Dan in this argument. 4 plays into last year, this season went down in flames, an Achilles flame to be more specific for Aaron Rodgers. And if there's one thing we know about offensive line depth around the NFL, it doesn't exist. So grab yourself an Olu Fashanu, a Troy Fautanu, grab yourself a Tali Fuaga, whoever it is. I don't care if it's a right tackle or a left tackle. I need somebody that if something happens to my 35-year-old left tackle who has been so limited over the past 4 seasons in Tyron Smith, I want a guy that I can trust, not the alternative we saw last year.
And you know what they can't do is do what they did last year where the line ranked 30th in pass block win rate and 29th in run block win rate, just bottom of the barrel on both sides.